Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, May 17th, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. My guest tonight has a podcast described as House of Hair meets Sirius XM Octane with a dash of Howard Stern and a splash of Eddie Trunk. Producer and host of the Hard, Heavy, and Hair Show, a weekly syndicated radio show airing across 5 continents and major markets including New York, Los Angeles, London, Sydney, Berlin, and of course Toronto. I'm not a betting man, but I bet with a podcast like that plays music, you're going to be getting submissions from bands, and I'm betting he might have some advice to share on the topic. Please welcome my guest tonight, podcast producer and host, and a fan of Harleys and whiskey, Pariah Burke. Pariah.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going great, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Beautiful day here in Toronto. How's it going in Portland?
Also a beautiful day.
Excellent.
Nice and sunny.
It helps the mood.
Yes.
It helps the mood when there's a bit of sunshine out, because it's when everything's gray and gloomy and you look at the window and you're like, oh, whatever. But you go outside in a bit of sunshine and you get energized.
Yes, absolutely.
We were talking briefly before too. You've been doing some hiking.
Yeah, just easy day hike kind of stuff. Portland's got some great trails around it.
You mentioned you had a themed hike.
Oh no. You're going to make me talk about this.
It's on the internet. I can talk about it. It's not a secret Facebook. If you post it on Instagram.
Oh, that's right. It is on Instagram.
It is.
Okay. So my significant other, who may or may not be watching right now, and who is probably also embarrassed. So my significant other has had a bet going with one of her coworkers. Whoever got out and started exercising first, when the rain broke and the weather got nice. And my girlfriend lost the bet. The bet was the loser would wear a tutu while hiking and doing any outdoor events. Well, as the boyfriend of this person, I got roped into the same bet, so we go hiking in tutus. I have a neon green one, and she has a hot pink one.
And you're saying the people you'd pass on the trails, they'd keep a straight face?
They do. Most of them will keep a straight face until they just get past us, and then it's, a guffaw, or they just bust out laughing, or, it's usually a positive response. Once in a while, there's, damn weirdos, kind of thing.
Well, that could be one thing, and be like, oh, it's weirdos. But also, some people would be like, they're living their best life right now. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, and we're just having fun. And, I'm out there wearing what I normally wear, a skull bracelet, a Keith Richards skull ring. I wear a lot of jewelry. I have the long hair, depending on the trail, we're wearing a mask, maybe, or not wearing one. And, I've got band shirts on. I'm wearing Motley Crue t-shirts or Tesla or something. And a neon pink tutu or neon green tutu.
I think it looked like fun. I think it looked like someone could see that and go, oh, is this a new trend happening here? Is this what's going on 2021?
Yeah. If you see people hiking in tutus, we started it.
That's where you got it from. No, I thought it was good. And we were chatting about, just hiking and just being outside, and not to go too far into this, but like here in Ontario and in Toronto, just the amount of lockdowns we've had, and like even in the winter, you would just go to the mall just to walk around, because like when the weather's really bad or it's really cold or it's just crummy out, it's like at least you could go indoors somewhere and walk around. And it's like we couldn't do that for so many months, and when the weather got nicer, it's like just being outside. And it's awesome to hear other people that enjoy hiking and just being outside, because you miss it when it's gone, sort of thing.
Yeah, you do.
So how things been otherwise?
Excellent. The show's going great. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately. Tracy Guns from LA Guns, Reb Beach, guitarist for Whitesnake and Winger. Robin McCauley from MSG and Black Swan, who just came out with a solo record, brand new solo record. Just great conversations with them. Talking politics with George Lynch from Dawkins and Lynch Mob. And learned some things about Portland from George that I didn't know previously. About some of the politics. I mean, he's really dialed in.
If you care to share any of the things you didn't know about Portland, you can dodge that if you want. I know.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the dates and specific ordinance, or not ordinances, but zoning issues.
Okay.
But it would get. I think we'd get mired down in
right.
politics.
It's always interesting seeing, hearing what some other, trying to think of the right word for it. Just other things that like musicians are really into, interests that musicians have, and politics can definitely be one of them, and definitely have some strong opinions, one way or another with that. I've seen you're over 300 episodes on the podcast.
Yeah, this week's airing show is 305. So it's on the air right now. It's a pre-recorded show, 2-hour show that airs every week. So it's on the air right now somewhere.
So 300 episodes in, with the interviews. I got a couple questions about that because I was looking over that stuff today. Okay. With the interviews, not to play favorites, but is there any, and President Company excluded, not to play favorites, but is there anyone that you've had on your show where you're just like, it was awesome, I got a chance to chat with them?
Okay, this may sound self-serving, but you're one of the people that I was really grateful to have the chance to talk to. You were a guest on my show first, and that's how we started talking about maybe me eventually coming on your show. And I really liked talking to you. I mean, we talked about the music, but we talked about the business of music and being a band and, in today's world. And you had all this great advice for musicians who are trying to make it now and looking at social media and making sure that their presence is consistent and they're constantly putting out content like Tense Machine does. You guys have the Wednesday and Sunday live shows. And I really enjoyed our conversation. It was great. And I got some good feedback from my listeners on all the advice you were giving too.
Excellent.
And then another one, recently, Connie Bloom. He's the he's the front man and guitarist and chief songwriter for a band called the Electric Boys, from back in the 80s and all the way through. They've been, pretty consistent. They broke up for a few years, but they're back. And I've always been a fan of that band. I don't get starstruck. I don't fanboy, but it was really cool to talk to this person whose music I've enjoyed for, I still want to say 1990 was 20 years ago, but I think it was 30. I've enjoyed his music for like 3 decades. And I got to talk to him, and it's like talking to your heroes, So yeah, the interview with Connie was really good. Can I tell you a quick story that Connie told me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Connie's a guitar player first, then a vocalist, and he's in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. And I guess a couple of years ago, there was a big banquet event for Swedish royalty and Led Zeppelin. And they invited many of the local Swedish artists to play during this banquet. And it's not a normal gig environment. It's people eating. It's a silent room while you're playing. And they invited Connie to play Led Zeppelin in front of Led Zeppelin. So, and he got some people together and they did kind of a medley and they changed things up. But can you imagine the pressure of being a guitarist, playing in front of Jimmy Page's own music?
Probably not the first thing you want to get out of bed in the morning for.
Yeah. Well, so Connie tells me, he says, as soon as we were off stage, we ran to the bar very, very fast. And then this big guy comes up and taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you Connie Bloom, Jimmy Page wants to see you." And Connie goes, "I'm going to get beat up by Jimmy Page." And then I guess Page shook his hand and he was so excited. And he's like, "Wow, you guys did, that was such a great way to play our music. That was an awesome way to do it." But still, the pressure of playing Page's music in front of Page. So
I can only imagine what that would feel like. Do you remember, I think it was a few years ago, Sting was being like honored at an award show, and another artist was performing one of the songs on stage, but they kind of like made it their own, and like Sting could not really hide his emotions in the crowd, and he was kind of like, okay, this is cool, different. But I can only imagine what it's like for artists to really hear someone covering their song, and but at the same time too, I can imagine from Jimmy Page's perspective, you hear someone that does a wicked job of it, and be like, yeah, okay, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, but how many people have not done a really good job with Led Zeppelin?
Well, absolutely,
over the years.
Yeah, no, you can probably go. I think you could probably go through at least 100 pages on YouTube of people butchering Final Countdown or something like that. There's certain songs.
Buying a stairway to heaven.
I'm sure. Yeah, I wonder if they had to do a little bit of a vetting process before letting people join that show, or just give them the benefit of the doubt.
Well, the Electric Boys have a couple of double or triple platinum albums, so
Trust.
and they've been around since I think their first album was '88. So
the trust is there.
Yeah,
it'll be good. It'll be good. Don't worry. But it's last thing too. It's just like to hear someone with that much experience and like that much of a pro. Still, it sounds like there's a little bit of butterflies there, being like, I hope this is good, because I think this is good. But yeah. I'm not Jimmy Page. I wasn't in Led Zeppelin.
Well, mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you ever get butterflies talking to some of your guests who are, really big drummers or other musicians you admire?
I will say I know a lot of the guests that I've had on the show. Only a couple people that I've had on so far. Like I've kind of gone in a little bit cold, but like we've got a mutual friend, and but that being said, there's a few people that I would like to get on the show that I know that I feel like I would need a little bit more experience with the show in this role before I would ask them, because I'd feel like, they've done hundreds, if not thousands of interviews. And I don't want to go in there and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't sound very good. So to answer your question, in long form, I'd be nervous with some people. Same question on your end?
I haven't really been nervous. I have a good friend of mine plays in, I'm not going to mention the band, but they're international touring band. And he gets starstruck, and he's commented on how he can't believe how I don't. I can just walk into a room, with people whose albums I've been buying since I was a kid, and just stick out my hand and go, "Hey, nice to meet you," and then I always forget to do like the selfie with them or anything. I just don't think of them. I'm like, "Oh, hey, I love the way you played this. I love this riff on this album," or, your timing on this was just really cool. What made you want to? And I just get into talking to them, and I forget I should get an autograph or a photo or something. I just forget about that.
Document it.
Yeah, So it's just I'm talking to people. That's all.
No, I think that's the mindset of it. It's like a lot of musicians, actors, like athletes, they're people with jobs. Yeah. And it's like, talk to them like people with jobs. It's just like it's okay. Like they're just doing their thing. I'm trying to think of the words for it. There's something to be said about asking some, like, just the way you're talking about, you're giving a compliment and stuff, but just like being genuine about it and not going up with because with the starstruck thing with some people, it's like, it turns into butt kissing, and like endless praise. It's like, no, there's a difference between, like, in my opinion, difference between praise and a compliment. It's like to go and compliment, like, oh, I think, you're a great guitar player and, really love your work. And you can just chat with them as a person. It's like, they've already established that. But if it's kind of the praise thing and you kind of put them up, like, it can make them feel uncomfortable a little bit.
Yeah, especially if you've got a shy person. Everybody, well, there are different people who just have trouble taking a compliment, and they can be in any profession, including up on a stage, jumping around in front of 50,000 people. You can still be shy, because, you've been on stage. It's different. It's not public speaking. It's not what a lot of people think of.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of those things, like, I'm not one for public speaking. The idea of having to speak in front of people, I'm like, no, I'll find any way to get out of that. But the idea of going up on stage with my band and performing and knowing people are enjoying that and it's fun for everybody, it's like, that's completely different. 5 people, 50,000 people. And even with teaching too, it's the same thing. I tell them day one, I'm like, I don't like public speaking. Like, it's the last thing I want to do, but, like, I like recording. I like the recording arts. I can talk about this all day. I can answer questions all day. So it's like, it's a different framing for it. So, no, I hear you with that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. If it's something I'm knowledgeable about and passionate about, then I'm knowledgeable about a lot of things, but I don't always have a passion for them. But if I'm passionate about it, I can just talk. I've been on stage in front of 1,000 people giving a speech, and I don't care. I don't care if there's 1,000 people there. This camera's trained on me. All I care about is that the mic clip to my shirt works, because I'm passionate about this, and I want to share my knowledge and information with you because you're passionate about it, the audience. And that's kind of what the radio and the podcast is. It's, I'm passionate about the music. The musicians, the history of rock and roll, of music in general, but, really rock. And I just lose myself in it. So I can talk about it on camera or on stage or on, sitting alone in a recording booth, whatever. Or just sitting in a restaurant across from a musician,
With the podcast, getting it started, was there something that kind of triggered that, or something you were thinking about for a bit, or like how did that transition kind of happen between it being an idea and it becoming a reality?
Good question. Nowadays, most people listen to streaming media. We listen to Spotify or, Pandora a couple of years ago was really big, Apple Music, all that stuff. These services only pretty much play the singles. And then with the advent of people making playlists or Spotify hiring moderators to make, or not moderators, curators to make playlists, you get exposed to some things that are not necessarily a single song. It might be just a really good song. But I've always been somebody who loves listening to full albums. There's AOR, album-oriented rock, but I've always liked listening to albums of all kinds because there are always hidden gems. If most people probably know that record companies tend to pick the singles. An artist will record, 8 to 12 songs and put an album together, and then the record company will say, this sounds like your first single, this will be your second single, this is the single on release day, blah, blah, blah. And the artists have some input, but they don't always get to choose their favorite songs. And some artists, most famously, everybody's seen Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie. Most famously, Freddie Mercury and the guys from Queen fought to have the song Bohemian Rhapsody made their first single at a time when the average radio song was 3 minutes. And here's this 7-minute song.
Epic 7-minute song.
Right. this is in the radio business, we'd call it a toilet song. It's a DJ would put on a long song so we'd have time to run to the head or grab a smoke or, whatever. But the band had those instincts, and Queen was in a position they could do that. Most artists, especially these days, are not really in a position, if they have a label and they're not self-releasing, that they can say, no, this is the single. So then you got these gems on these albums that never get heard. Bands don't play them in concert because fans want to hear the songs they know. So these songs we call them deep cuts or deep tracks. They're album tracks that are not singles. And I've always loved those, and I always wished I could play more of those on the radio. And then I was talking to a couple of friends who are also in the radio business, and they're like, why don't you do it? Start up a web radio station or something. I was like, so I did a little research on that, and I was like, wow, there's 1 million web radio stations out there with 3 or 4 listeners. And I don't want to program a whole 24-hour period. That's just not where my interests lie. So I was like, well, I'm going to start up a radio show and syndicate it and see what happens. And then I chose an on-air name, and everybody in radio, Pariah Burke is my real name. It is not an air name. Now, general practice in radio is you don't use your real name. Wolfman Jack, his mom didn't name him Wolfman.
Middle name is not Jack. Yeah.
Yeah. I've worked with, Sam I Am, who was a great DJ, a woman. Samantha was her real name. She always changed it, Sam to something, Anyway, you make up a name. So I was going to be Whiskey Wade Bolin. And then everybody kept telling me, no, your real name's so much better radio name. Just doesn't matter what the convention is. Do it anyway. All right. So I had made this 2-hour demo I did a demo with Whiskey Wade Bolin and sent it around, and I got a bunch of orders from, smaller radio stations initially, and some bigger ones were like, come back to us when you've got X number of affiliates already. And then I did it again as me and sent it around. I said, I'm modifying the offer. What do you think? And they liked it even more. So, and then, so the show, it's a radio show that after it airs on the radio, I put it up as a podcast. So you can listen to it, and I have a licensing arrangement with a company called Mixcloud. They pay the artist the royalties. The reason most people can't hear music in regular podcasts or on, video casts is there's no mechanism for the artists you play to get paid. So as opposed to radio where, in the United States, the FCC is listening, in other countries, other agencies are listening, and they make sure that the artists and the songwriters and the labels get paid. So I'm fortunate in I found a way to do that so I could still have this music show that people can listen to on demand. So long story, sorry. It's good. It's interesting because I'm always interested, like how interested in how people got started, and I'm curious, like between the first kind of few episodes and like when it got picked up, like how many episodes did you go through? Like what was the evolution process like? Well, it's constantly growing. I'm still adding stations. The first month, I think we had 2 or 3 internet radio stations. My second affiliate was Jamaica.
Really?
Yeah. It just shocked me. I mean, the first was an internet station, Carl Radio, KARL, and then the second one was, I can't remember the name of it, and I'm sorry for not giving them a decent plug, but it's a Jamaican radio station. They're an FM in Jamaica. So first month was just a couple. I started reaching out on, various groups. There's a website called allaccess.com, which is kind of a music radio business kind of site, they give you charts, there's music distribution as part of it. So, an artist will submit to CD Baby and CD Baby will route it through them. And then there's forums. And so I started reaching out and, there's production directors or program directors and DJs and everything. It was like, hey, I've got this syndicated show. If you're interested, here's my EPK, here's a demo reel. And that started getting a lot of interest over the next couple of months. And I think by the end of the first year, I think I had somewhere between 15 and 20. It was less than 20 affiliates, but somewhere around there.
No, it's awesome to hear too. Just you mentioned forums, like looking for people that are interested and like going to communities, and like that's something that I think bands are missing these days. It's one thing for bands and artists to like, follow us on Instagram or like follow us on Facebook, but they're not actually going to the communities where the music fans actually are. It's like it's like they just stand outside the store and they just keep saying, great stuff in here, come on. But it's like, no, build a community. Like go find where the communities are and go make some friends there. Cause I was just curious too, like just how you picked up those affiliates and picked up those other stations. But it's like, there's work. There's work beyond actually making the podcast or doing the show. Oh yeah.
Marketing is a huge part of anything you want to do these days. Anything that you're self-employed at or you're doing yourself, or part of a team, your band, for example, you've got to market, you've got to self-promote. I have one of the things that Hard Heavy in Hair is the show. Oh yeah, I'm wearing the shirt.
It's shirt, yes.
Hard Heavy in Hair is the show. We also have a Facebook group, which is just for discussion of music, right? And I get artists that come in and they do nothing but just post a video, their latest video. I mean, that's okay. That does let people know you're out there. But then when somebody else, just a listener or a music fan posts a question like, hey, who's your favorite hard rock band from Toronto? The bands are not following it up and saying, well, I'm in this band, XYZ, and it happens to be my favorite. That's the kind of thing they could be doing. It's self-promotional, but it's not sleazy. It's, hey, we're out here. You might, if you like this band, if you like this kind of music, you might like ours. Why don't you give us a try? So, and for most people, just playing a Spotify track is free. Just watching a YouTube video is free. The artist gets paid, and you and I have talked about how little that is, but
it's more than zero. It's more than zero.
So that kind of thing. Participate in discussions. Talk about other musicians. Talk about people who influenced you and say, hey, this riff that I did on this song came straight from what I was just listening to this other record on repeat and I just came up with it. That kind of thing. People want to hear that. People want to talk about it. And that gets them to your music.
Yeah, no, the story is like that's definitely
it. I just saw the comment.
So. Which one? The Love Your Hair, by the way?
And also I have the most soothing voice.
Most soothing voice. I would agree.
Well, thank you. You have a really soothing voice too.
I don't know about that, but thank you. It's funny because again, like how we hear our voices in our heads, sort of thing.
Oh yeah, and
yeah.
I get that question a lot because I do the radio show. I do a little voiceover work on the side. I've done training videos, and you've done videos for your classes. And given the current environment, I teach a class at Portland State University. Given the current environment, we're remote, so I've done some videos, instead of doing a live class. And the question is always, how do you do this and edit it and not hate your voice? I'm like, you get used to it. I mean, right now I'm hearing what everybody else is hearing because I'm monitoring through my AirPods, but normally I hear a completely different voice than everybody else does. And then I go and I produce the show and it's like, oh, that's what I sounded like. Okay. But you get used to it, right?
Yeah, you do get used to it. I would say, like, especially because like the last year, the amount of live streaming, just chatting and just being online, you do get used to it after a while. So if anyone's listening, you're not sure about your voice, just start.
Yeah. And when if people were listening, if someone tells you have a nice voice, believe them. It's not the voice you hear, so it sounds alien, and you may think it's bad, but trust people when they tell you have a good voice.
Just roll with it. I'm trying to think of the flip side too. People that have voices that that produce or promote anxiety and stress, like those types of voices.
Oh, Fran Drescher.
I was gonna say,
The actress.
Bobcat Goldthwait, remember from from Police Academy? He had a really interesting, really interesting voice. But it's like, if that was your roommate or something, like, is everything okay? Like, yeah, I was just asking if you want to grab breakfast or something. Oh, we were dating ourselves a little bit. Yeah, no, it is funny. The more you do this kind of stuff, the more you get used to it. Other question I had about the show, at what point did you feel like you had something? Was there an episode where you listen, you're like, no, like, we've got something here. Like, this is kind of the model, and like, let's roll with this. Like, this is good.
I don't think there was an epiphany moment. I think it was just, I did say at one point to myself, I leaned back and I said, we were done, we were producing it, or I produced it, it was done, it was being distributed. I was like, you know what, that's the show I want to hear. That's the radio show because I grew up on Casey Kasem and, when I was really little, Wolfman Jack and Shadow Stevens, and, just those big voices and the big attitude, and somebody just expressing a love of the music and being able to talk about it. And I listened to this one show and I was like, yeah, that's the show I want to listen to. I know all the facts that this guy just said because I was the guy who said them, but that's the show I'd want to listen to. And we make changes over time. We refine it here and there. We try different things. But I think after the first year was somewhere around month 13 or 14 is when I leaned back. I was like, yeah, that's what I want. That's the show I would like to listen to. And then I measure every show I do against that one yardstick.
And how many episodes in is that?
Back when I had that moment.
Yeah.
So that would have been like, it's a weekly show, so maybe show 60, somewhere around there.
And 2-hour shows?
Yeah.
So it's 120 hours in, and then how long around that 2 hours, like, how much time goes into that?
Oh, God, lots. A couple of days. I do a lot of research. If I've got an interview, then that's, researching my interview subject, talking to my interview subject, then doing the editing. And usually interviews are longer than I can fit on the air. On a 2-hour radio show, I can do 8 to 14 minutes of an interview. And then I'll do the long form interview as a separate podcast or video. But, so I've got to go in and find that 8 to 14 minutes. And then, picking the music, it's a couple of days worth of work. We get tons of music every week, and my biggest problem is I can't play everything. I can play 24 to 28 songs in 2 hours, depending on whether I have an interview in there. And I get 150 to 250 new songs every week. So I'm, a fraction of what I can play.
I'm curious. How much of that do you listen to?
Almost all of it.
Okay, I want to stop you there for a second. Almost all of it. Is there anything right off the bat where you're just like, this just doesn't get a look?
Unfortunately, yes. Well, I mean, first off, I separate out some genres. My show plays hard rock, mainstream heavy metal, and hair bands, colloquially called hair bands or glam or hair metal or whatever. We don't play death metal or doom metal or anything like that unless it's something really special, like Tracy Guns from LA Guns has a new project with the Striper vocalist Michael Sweet, Sunbomb. It's doom metal, but it's Tracy Guns. So here's an evolution of Tracy Guns music. So I played Sunbomb. But generally we don't play death metal and try to limit the thrash and speed metal to just rare samples. So I filter out the genres. I get a lot of everything. So you say metal and you get everything. So, the death metal goes to the side. I may listen to it for enjoyment, but I can't air it. Stuff like that. Then there are submissions that would fit probably, but they're not air ready.
What does that mean?
They can be submitted so there's a lot that goes in. For people who don't know, MP3 music files have what's called bit rates. It's the quality of the audio versus the file size. Now, a top quality MP3 is 320 kilobytes per second, which is really good. It's better than CD quality. CD quality is 256 kilobytes per second. And that's the minimum that any radio station, any FM or AM station, what we call a terrestrial station, will air. Typically, they won't touch anything that's not 320 or better. And it can't be better with an MP3. If it's better, it means it's a different format. It's a WAV file or a FLAC FLAC, or it's an OGG OGG file. It's a couple other formats. So I'll get song submissions that are 128 kilobytes per second, or once in a while even a 64 kbps MP3. And those qualities are so low, my show would be rejected by the terrestrial stations if I sent the segments. The show is sent in solid recordings and segments, rather than each song plus separate talk tracks. So my show would be rejected if they heard a song of that low quality in my mix. And so it can't be played. So anything that's under 256, I simply reject. If it's 256, I'll listen. I can sometimes squeak that by as long as I don't do it too often. But typically, I prefer WAV because then it's a minimum of 1,000 kilobytes per second. Most of them I get, it's 4,000, and then I can downsample that if I need to, or the stations can downsample, because I produce in WAV. So everything gets mixed and it gets put out as a WAV. So those get automatically filtered out. Low quality audio recordings. And then you have the metadata, missing metadata. Mike, what's the name of the FCC equivalent in Canada?
For metadata?
Or no, for like broadcast regulation and everything?
I thought it was the FTC up here.
FTC?
I think so.
Okay. Down in the States, it's FTC is the Federal Trade Commission.
Yeah, I think up here. I think it's FTC up here.
Okay. So the FCC in the U.S., the FTC in Canada, and similar organizations in most other countries have certain requirements for digital broadcast media. For example, if you're on the radio, you must identify the song artist and title somehow. That's either a DJ reading it out, introducing the song, or back introing it after we play it, or you transmit that data on a metadata line, a sub-channel of the radio broadcast. And on newer radios, car radios, it shows up. That's how you see the artist. That's the metadata. That's the artist name, the album title, the date, of release, the song title, track number, all that stuff. That's metadata. And that metadata is legally required for terrestrial stations. You have to broadcast that. Now, most internet-based stations, at least the ones that use this service called Live 365, which in the U.S. is, as far as I understand it, is the only option left, unless you make special arrangements to pay the art or pay the what's called the pros, the agencies that get artists their money for airplay. Unless you make arrangements with them directly, you have to use Live 365, and Live 365 requires metadata in each track that's played as well. And then I have to provide a playlist to every station that airs my show when I provide the audio files. And that playlist has to be song title, artist name, and fortunately I don't also have to provide album title. But they have to provide that in some cases. So I'll get music submissions that have the metadata messed up. You know, the artist and title reversed, which, you know, in hard rock and metal isn't always easy to figure out which one is the band name. Sorry, someone just texted me on my
I have a correction to make. It's not FTC here. It's CRTC is the equivalent in Canada.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the CRTC. Okay, thank you.
Got a buddy that works in telecommunications, and I know he said that a whole bunch of times, but I was thinking it was FTC because Federal Telecommunications Canada. I thought it was that, but no, it's Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so metadata is legally required for broadcasting, and I'm required to do it right so that the stations can broadcast legally, and it's also a courtesy. So I need music coming to me with correct metadata, and if I'm getting, I've gotten, for example, there was this one promoter, and I'm not going to mention anybody's name, so please don't ask. There was this one music promoter, had a lot of clients, and they were sending me music with the artist name and title in the title field. So the artist field, metadata is this table of data that's built into the code of music files. So there are specific slots for things. The artist fields were empty. The genre field would have comments about everything, like telling me who the co-writers were and all that stuff, which is great information if it's in the right place. And then the album title would have the album title, and then in parentheses, the genre or multiple genres that it might fit into, and marketing copy. So yeah, it's just, so then at that point, I've got this music with bad or missing metadata, and my choices are, if I listen to it and like it and I want to air it, or if I listen to it and I think my listeners are going to like it. What I like is not always the same as what I air. Then somebody's got to fix that metadata. And it's either going to be me or somebody who works for me, and I'm going to have to pay them to fix it. I've tried kicking them back to the artists, and once in a while, if I'm dealing with the artist directly, they usually fix everything no problem. And it's usually an educational moment. It's like, oh, we didn't know we needed this. But if I'm dealing with promoters or, managers, a lot of times they just don't want to fix it. They just say, well, don't air it then. I'm like, okay. And it's really bad. It really bothers me because a big reason I do this is to play music that you might not hear elsewhere, and especially from artists that might be self-publishing or smaller or up and coming. If I get music from Frontier's music label, the metadata is always perfect. They're a big label. If I get self-published music, the metadata might not always be perfect. So having the right metadata is just absolutely crucial. And I've seen other radio people programming directors, on-air talent, just, flat out refuse the music. They won't even listen to it. I've heard things like, and I wrote this article about it, and this is what got you and me talking about it, I think, because so many people on Facebook were like, you know what, I don't get paid to fix the metadata, so I'm just not doing it. Or the music instantly gets deleted if I don't have metadata. And usually that's unfortunately the way I have to do it as well. There just isn't time to fix it, or I don't want to pay somebody to fix it.
No, it's just, hearing you talk about it. I double checked on my my work computer here. The program I use is called ID3 Editor,
Yes.
and when you open the MP3 up, it using ID3 Editor, it gives you all the options of the artist name, the song title, the year it was released, the publisher, all that stuff's there. So hearing you say there's just wacky stuff put into some of those entry fields, I'm just like, how did that even happen? How did someone say like, okay, artist name, let's put the song title, and then in brackets we'll put the genre, and on or artist we'll just put some notes about the song. Like how do you think that happens?
I think it was somebody, probably the promoter, trying to be creative, doing creative promotion. I think it's the same kind of thing as when I get all the fields in all caps or weird camel case, trying to catch attention out of a list. Because, at least with me, I don't know how others do it, but all the music I get, I just, for the week, I just dump it into our music server, into basically an inbox, and then I go through it. And I start tagging things for, air on the show, brand new song, this is a good one for, I'll start making notes and things. But so I'm assuming that that's probably how most people do it. And I think the idea is make it stand out, make the music so that if this field is extra long, then it'll stand out amongst this long vertical list of others. Yeah, but I can't air it like that.
It's
so
wrong.
Either I choose to manually fix it, or I pay somebody to fix it, or I just send it away.
That, sorry, not to cut you out, but that, like, hearing you say that too, it's like, I know that feeling, and so many of us know that feeling when someone's just like, well, can you just fix it for us? And you're like, I can, but it's not you, but someone before you screwed it up for me, because I used to fix it, and then it never ends. So I'd rather you learn to fish and learn to figure this one out so that you can submit it properly next time, and not just have someone fix things for you because you got it wrong.
Right, and that's why when it comes directly from an artist, I'm a lot more likely to reach out and explain what's wrong and say, hey, can you fix this for me? Because, like I said, it's usually an educational thing. The artist doesn't know. Because nowadays, so many people are self-publishing, and the label used to take care of all this stuff. The engineer used to do all this stuff for you. So yeah, do you mind? So this, I had sent this promoter about a year and a half ago. I had sent them a request saying, you're sending me a lot of music. It's good, but I can't, the metadata is missing. And this is the one that was doing a lot of the genre in the album field, and the genre field had marketing copy. And I sent them a polite email, and I said, hey, we're required to have this metadata, and, it's the law. Can you please, and the email I got back was, quote, wow, sorry we can't meet every single last radio show's request. This was their job to do. Nice attitude, guys, end quote. And then he identifies who referred him to me. And he says, okay, I'll take you off the promo list. So now I don't get exposed to any of his artists, which is really unfortunate. And I liked some of the artists that he did send me, or this company sent me. I shouldn't say he, it's a company. So yeah, and I'm not the only one. I'm the one who, I've talked to some of my peers, and most of the time they're like, yeah, I don't even bother to reach out. I just delete their stuff and don't say anything. They're like, Pariah, you're too nice to do that.
nice to give feedback.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like I said, it's about playing the music. And how do you break in nowadays? In the 60s and 70s, and 80s, if you were a small artist, you could, bug a radio DJ, wait in the parking garage and shove your cassette into his hand, or your 45 in earlier times, and say, please play us. Well, you can't do that now. There's some of that, but most of the time you just can't. So, you get it out there electronically somehow. So I want artists to know I want to give tips on how you can get your best chances to get airplay for your music, because you can't just call us up on the air anymore, or, show up at the studio most of the time anymore. And metadata is a big one. Get the metadata right. If you use iTunes or Apple Music, this is one of the big offenders. It sometimes messes up your metadata, so check it after you've exported from iTunes or Apple Music. It's not you, it's the software's messing it up, but make sure you check it. And make sure if you do have somebody repping you, check. Know what they're sending out. Give them here's a sneaky tip. Come up with a fake email or a new email address that has nothing to do with your name or your band's name. And then tell them, put this address on the distribution list. This is somebody that should have the music too. And then you can see everything that's being sent out with your name on it.
That's a good tip.
Thanks.
Because why would you not think to do that? There's musicians and labels, management, like everything is part of a team these days, but just like stay in that loop, because you're right. There's a number of bands and artists where, like, once they bring other people on, they have no idea what's actually happening on the back end.
Right. And we've both heard all of the horror stories about, the money aspect of not knowing what's going on.
Well, just that, but even just as you're talking about it, music going out, and just one of my things with bands that do get a label or management, it's like they think that that's where the work kind of stops on their end. And it's like, you still need to do a lot of work, but also know what's happening in the other camps as well. Because if you stop working with that management or that label or whoever, if you remove yourself from that loop, and you no longer have those networks and stuff, you don't have anything once you're gone. So, like, knowing what happens on the back end, some of the artists that I've known have done the best, especially when their label deals up or they can break away. It's like they paid attention to the back end. So when they could go independent, they still kind of had everything, but they also had the knowledge. It's like, think of it as like we're contractors. It's like, there's one thing to do stonework or plumbing or be an electrician. It's like, if you know those different jobs, you don't need to be the best at them, but if you have a general idea of how they work, you know who to bring in to do it, but also if you need to fix something like our metadata, you can just go in there and do it. It's not this big thing.
Yeah.
And rant.
Let me see. Yeah, what is it I use? Oh, Kid 3. Is that what you use for the metadata?
I use ID3 editor.
ID3. Okay. So Kid 3 right? KID3. I have this in my launch bar on OS 10 on my or not OS 10 on my Mac OS Finder window, so I can just drag MP3s and drop them right on there. Kid 3 is another one I like. It just shows you all the metadata titles. You can even paste in your album cover right there in the user interface, which is kind of cool. And then if it's for music, well, never mind. Forget that. Anyway, there's a ton of MP3 metadata editors out there, or metadata taggers is another search term to use. And so make sure that you're sending it out right. Make sure that your representatives are sending it out correctly. And as far as that extra information, so here's what we absolutely need. We need artist, title, and that's the bare minimum. Album title is often very important, especially for these internet radio stations that use Live 365. So make sure those three are correct. And make sure your name, your artist name is the way it's listed with BMI or any of the other songwriting or, licensing systems, because that's how you're going to get paid. It's got to match their catalog, because it's all automated. Nobody's sitting there reading through playlists of radio stations anymore. And we're not sitting, in the old days, we would be sitting and that's the list that would go out at the end of the week or the month. Now it's just automated. So make sure the spelling's right. Genre is very helpful, especially for programming, because sometimes you play on a rock station, you might play a new wave of classic rock, and then the next thing that follows it should be glam metal, then the next thing that follows that. There's a formula on some of these stations, so the genre helps. It also helps identify what somebody should be expecting when they spin it to audition the song for air. Let's see. What else? Album title, the track number, if it's a part of an album, that's good. So that's the bare minimum. But there's a whole bunch of other metadata fields in there. There's a comments field. There's a publisher. There's you can put in the label. In the comments, put in contributions by somebody. Put in, co-songwriters, things like that. And you might have all this stuff in your electronic press kit, your EPK. But here's a secret. On-air personalities are lazy. Or busy. Wait, no. I meant busy. We're busy. EPKs get misplaced. EPK is a separate file, at least one file, that may or may not be right on hand while your song is coming up in the card, or, if it's, after playing it. But your metadata is right there. It's on screen because it's always part of the music file. So we get to see all the metadata, like composers, lyricists, comments, original date, if it's a revision, or your acoustic version of a previously released track. And it also gives us information that we can read out to listeners that really love it. Like, that was new band with that song featuring old band's Bobby Smith on guitars and Mary James from other band on vocals. It was produced by famed Robert Jones, who has worked with Led Zeppelin, Skid Row, and Godsmack. That kind of thing. If it's in the metadata, I can talk about that. I don't have to look it up. I don't have to track down an EPK, especially if it's, a last-minute change. Your song got inserted in last minute, and we didn't have time to prep anything to talk about it. Put that in the metadata so it's right there, and we can pull it up, and we can talk about it. And that kind of information, that makes listeners remember your music more. If I play it and I say, that was a Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin. Next song is... It's the equivalent of a bar band. It's forgettable. But when there's facts about your music, then it's like, oh, especially if people can relate it to something else they like. If I talk about the producer, or if I say, that was the latest Tense Machine featuring some of the guys from Never Say Die, or Dead Set Society, formerly Never Say Die. Sorry.
That's all good. It's all good.
Things like that. People remember it, and they'll go track you down better. They'll find you on Spotify. So yeah, that kind of stuff. And then, let's see. Another thing I get, unfortunately, is I get a lot of press releases, which are helpful. That gives me information. But the press releases need to have music with them. If I don't have your music, I'm not going to talk about you on the air. If you're Motley Crue or Kiss or Five Finger Death Punch, and you've got a show coming up, if you're A-list, top of the charts all the time, yeah, I will probably say, hey, there's a new show coming up, get your tickets for this. I'm not a local station, but your local stations will identify when somebody's coming to town. But if I don't have your music, I'm not going to talk about your news unless it's incredibly important. Someone's passed away, or the person who really is most associated with the sound of the band has left, that kind of thing. So give me music, not just the news. I love the news to go with your music.
I got a bunch of questions from what we were chatting about there. And also too, for anyone that's been listening to this, we've been chatting about metadata for probably 20 minutes or so right now. But it is that important in this day and age, because so much of the music is going onto the internet. Having that information there so it can be cataloged and everything properly. But getting back to the very initial point, it's like, if it's wrong, it gets passed over really quickly. It can be the next best thing, but if the metadata is wrong, if the information is wrong, it's not worth it to go through and fix all that for all the bands. So it's like, fix it on your end. If you're in a band, just fix it on your end. Like, when you get that feedback, hey, your metadata is incorrect, fix it on your end and resubmit it. In the long run, you'll benefit a lot. You mentioned too with the show, you say like a 2-hour show, you can fit in about 28 to 32 songs. I think around
about
there.
24 to 28.
24, 28. So the idea too, you talked about EPKs. It's like, imagine having 28 EPKs in front of you and you need to weed through all that information because you might go through some of it, but you're just saying, like, during game time, you want to have that information easily at hand. So the idea where you can put some of those key points in the comments of the metadata, like, it's good. It's going to make the host life easier, as you're saying, and more energy efficient. You could use that term too, as far as getting that information there. So it's like you're helping the people that are trying to help you.
Yes,
that makes sense. So yeah, we weren't just chatting about that for 20 minutes just for fun. It's like, it is important. And even the class that I teach, one of the classes, we do talk about metadata, and it's like, no one really thinks about it. And then after we're done, they're like, oh, that's it. I'm like, yeah, it's that easy. It's that easy to go in and fix it. And you can add your album artwork and like make it look good. And now it's pro. Now it's ready to pass around. You're not just emailing someone a 128 MP3 and know that it's not gonna sound that good, and it's missing all of its tags and everything, and it just kind of goes into the virtual wastebasket. So
yeah, and unfortunately, that's really what happens. It does get. I mean, like I said, I'm a little nicer than others. I'm a lot more. If I accidentally play something that doesn't have the metadata, and I think it's good for air, I'll try Shazamming it to see if I can get the info. Yeah. But if nobody else does that as far as I know. Any of the people I've talked to, they're like, wow, no, I just delete it. Okay. Another thing is, if the lyrics are explicit, there is no tag there's no field in the metadata to identify an explicit song. Spotify has it, but only within their system. It's not a universal metadata tag. So if you can identify that there's explicit lyrics, that's a really important one too, because a lot of internet stations don't care, but terrestrial stations get fined.
They care a lot.
$5,000 if certain words go out on the air. So when I play a song that's explicit, I have to identify this song is explicit, and then I have a clean version of the show that goes out to terrestrial stations that I bleep. I usually don't swap out music, but if there's an explicit and a clean version, I'll swap in the clean version, as long as they're the same length. Putting your lyrics in the metadata, there's a field for that. Yes. That's helpful. That gives on-air talent something to talk about. It also helps them make connections. I do a lot of themed shows or themed blocks. And I look for connections between songs. Sometimes it's one musician that plays in multiple bands, but other times it'll be lyrics, songs talking about this. So if I can search my database and it searches every metadata field, if it pulls something out of the lyrics and says this matches your search, then I have a chance of playing that. It also gives me something to talk about on the air. Like there's these things called mondegrids. Like CCR's Bad Moon on the Right, most people mishear it as there's a bathroom on the right. That's called a mondegrin. And sometimes you just don't know what the lyric is. So Elton John one that's slipping my mind right now.
I'm thinking of about 80% of Black Betty.
Yeah. Yeah. So having the lyrics in there helps at least the DJ know. And if he identifies a mondegrin where, you're mishearing it, then that's something the DJ can talk about, and that becomes a memorable piece for the listener about your song. A bar bet. Like way back in the old days before COVID, we had bars where we'd get together and people would have bets, and you could do things like, I bet you this song says that. No, it says this other thing. Right, lay down your $10. So, yeah. So the more information you can cram into metadata correctly, the better chance the on-air personality will use that information. I think it's spelled pretty close to just like that, Dawn. But yeah, and then, like Mike reiterated, the basic metadata is just essential. It's the law for us to broadcast with it. So you help us out a lot if you give it to us and don't ask us to spend time and effort and money figuring it out for you.
The other one too, like metadata, the ISRC code or ISRC, is that a must-have as well?
It's not a must-have. It's helpful because the ISRC identifies your song so that you get paid, and it makes it trackable. But the algorithms are listening for the stuff that runs Shazam is almost as good as what the Recording Industry of America and similar organizations have running and listening. So they're picking up, they know what song's playing. So that's kind of helpful. But no,
I was wondering about that, and now that you mentioned that it's something similar to Shazam and how it would be able to pick up in the music of who it belongs to, because like with my band Tense Machine, we do a lot. Like Dane Hartzell, singer and guitar player, does a lot of covers, and we chop those up from the live streams to put them on the internet or on YouTube, and it's crazy. He'll be playing it in a different key, but it'll grab certain parts of the song and say, oh, this is this song, that's this artist, and then they'll flag it. So you can't monetize it. Don't get a strike on the channel or anything. But I always thought that was interesting that it can still pick out like the intervals. And I was always thinking too, maybe it's the lyrics. It's grabbing the lyrics from it, because YouTube goes ahead and captions everything. Goes, okay, we'll put it against the database.
It might be analyzing just every part of the sound.
I think it's awesome that it can do that. I also think it's scary that it can do that.
Yep.
See, Don's got the correct spelling here.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Don.
Monogreen.
And there's a story behind that. Something about the most famous misheard has something to do with mondegreen, or mondegreen was the misheard word.
Could be a future topic.
Yeah.
Talk about it. I'm sure there's other ones, but just very misunderstood song lyrics for like new bands and stuff like that. Like, what are you saying?
Well, and nowadays we can just Google anything and get the right lyrics, but I've noticed they're not always correct either.
Well, we talk about with the metadata still with the lyrics. That was one of the things I'm glad you brought up, because like I make sure that our lyrics are in there as well. And then on YouTube, I make sure the lyrics are in there as well. So if anyone is curious, it's already there, because like there's other sites you can go to and you can find bands that have or find the lyrics from songs that you're looking for and stuff like that. And yeah, some of them aren't correct. Even though like I know they're correct on our end, you go online and be like, okay, it's a little different, but Still works.
Even your music?
With Tens Machine and Dead Set and
Oh.
yeah, there's some other sites that have the lyrics posted, but sometimes they're not entirely correct. Like they're like fans would put them in, or like other music people, or maybe it's automated from captioning.
Oh yeah, maybe. Because I always thought Dane and Reed were really clear singers.
I
Sorry, kinda
think
tripped
so
over my
as
tongue
well. But yeah, it's just once it hits the internet does its thing. So
I'm tunneling into the studio media server right now. I'm curious. I didn't know you put your lyrics in the
99% sure lyrics are in there.
Okay.
Usually there's a panel on ID3 editor. There's a panel for the album artwork and another one for the lyrics. So they jam all that stuff in there. You checking?
Yeah. It was, let's see.
I can just imagine with some like super hardcore metal bands, like having,
Oh yeah.
because I call some people out on, well, back when I was recording with certain bands, I would call people like, do you have words or sounds? Because like I'm really not getting a lot of, so not a lot of like hard T's and P's or anything coming out here. So just making sure I know what you're saying. Another reason too, and I'm tracking vocals, I like to have a lyric sheet with me. So that also, so you don't get the old email after you've done your vocal editing and prepping everything, like, oh, I meant to say this, this, and this. And you're like, oh, well, I had no idea what you were trying to say there. But yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's not in Best Mistake. I'm not seeing lyrics in that, but I'm sure it's in the others.
It should be there. It should be there. So we've gone over some of the ways that music instantly gets rejected. Is there, when you talk about the ways that bands try to like sneakily stand out, as far as music, are there things about the mix? Is there things about the recording? Is there things that put it on one side of the fence or the other between like, yeah, I'll listen to this, or like, no, this isn't ready at all, like production wise?
Yeah. Mastering matters. There's been a few that I've gotten. You can hear the potential of the artists. You can hear what your mind's ear can kind of hear what the song should sound like. And I'm sure you being an engineer works with so many other artists, you could immediately figure that out. But the recording doesn't sound like, the engineering's there, like the production value's there. Other than that, though, as long as the genres fit my show, I'll listen to them. I have personal things that I like and dislike, but they don't enter as much into what goes in the show. So yeah, it's more just the production value. And hard rock is a loud genre. Hard rock and metal, and by loud I mean the difference between the loudest point and the softest point on the waveform. So what might, and that often gets songs tossed out of pop or hip hop stations if they're too loud. But that's not an issue with my stuff, with my show.
As far as like production not sounding great, like how much of a song will you listen to before you're like, yeah, this isn't gonna work?
I usually I put everything, like I said, into an inbox and I just play it one after the other. When I get to a yes, then I go to the next song immediately. Or if it's if it's a definite yes, then I have a button I press. My iPad is actually a control panel. I just press this and it gets sorted to a different box. If I'm not sure or it sounds like a no, I'll skip around the song. I'll listen to the chorus. If the intro's like, some great songs have bad intros. So I'm like, okay, I'll skip to the chorus, maybe the middle, hit the end. you know, and then I'll decide if it's a no. If it just all these points are bad, and I may come back to it. I do that sometimes, or it may be a song that I personally like, but no, it's not going on air. So I'll come back to it, and you know. So yeah, I try to give every song its due because somebody, at least one person, at least one artist spent time crafting this and thinks it's good enough for air, so that deserves my respect enough to listen to it.
Have you ever messaged, like responded to a band where you're like, I like the song, but like the mix isn't there, or the, you know, the recording just doesn't stand up to what we need to put on air?
Yes, actually, fairly recently, I was sent 4 tracks, and they sounded like they had great potential, but the engineering, the mastering wasn't there. I sent them back. I said, look, I don't normally do this, but your music's good. I like it. I like what you wrote. I like the lyrics. It's just not high enough quality. But if you can go back and get them remastered, please send them back to me. And they did, and I aired one of those songs.
No, just because it can be a touchy subject for some bands. And especially these days, because a lot of bands are self-recording and self-producing. Or the flip side, they spent a lot of money on it. And it's not there yet.
Yeah. And I would hope that they're working with really good professionals, especially if they're paying somebody. But in this case, they did. They went to a mastering service and got everything remastered, and I think they sent the stems and had the stems, the individual instrument recordings, had those mastered individually, and then had the song remixed and mastered, and then it sounded so much better. And I was glad, you know, because like you said, it could have been, somebody could have been touchy about it. You know, I was glad it was received well. Yeah, definitely lots of variables.
Yes, there's that's one of those things on the mixing side of things. If you're into mixing, there's a mixer called Mixer Man, conveniently enough. And he's got a book called Diary of Mixer Man. And one of the things he talks about is just like, you never know what that mixer got to work with. You know, it's one thing for a mixer to take something from a 3 to a 7 and how much work that is. Meanwhile, for a mixer to take a 7 to an 8. And everyone's like, oh, the 8 sounds amazing. It's like, you don't know what that person got to work with in the first place. So hearing, like, the mastering's one thing, but like, was it the mix? Was it the tracking? Was there an instrument? There was a issue with the arrangement. Like, was there just actual things clashing with the arrangement that's throwing the ear off? So there's a lot of different layers that that can cause problems. I'll say, you know, you know, respect for sending that email, being like, no, I believe in the music. There's potential here, because like that's really sticking your neck out sometimes, because you can definitely upset some people. But I believe it's the greater good, you know, to give the opinion and give the feedback. Because you're not helping the artist if you're not.
Right. But the problem comes down to time. You know, how much time does an on-air personality or a program director have to reach out and make that contact and say, this is good music, but do this, this, and this. You know, and I just, something about this music, I just thought, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to give it a try. You know, I've had bad experiences asking for metadata, but I'm going to give it a try with, you know, I'm asking for something a lot more personal now, but, and they received it well. So that was good.
I'm glad it worked out. It reminds me of a story of a band I worked with years ago, and they were constantly submitting music to their local radio station. And after we worked together, they sent one of the songs, and that's when they got the feedback. They're like, we've liked what you guys have been doing for a long time, but like, this is something we can actually put on the radio now. This is something we can actually feature. And so like, I took that as a huge comment, but also like, I heard the same thing when I heard the band's music. I was like, I know what we can do with this. I know there's some production things that we can work on here and get it to where it needs to go. But yeah, as you're saying, it's a time thing. And like, to get back to so many bands, if like that's an easy one, it's like, and one of the things too, it's like, I think you either hear it or you don't. And I think you need to learn how to hear it. You need to learn how to hear that your music stands up to other, you know, not just commercially viable music, but like that professional broadcast quality music. Because not to go on a mini rant here, but when you listen to internet radio, when you listen to just, or even just, playlists on shuffle and stuff like that, there's production all over the map now. It's not like on radio, like terrestrial radio, where like you probably have a handful of people doing all the mixing and doing a lot of the producing. So a lot of the sounds are very similar. So like, especially in hard rock, there's like 5 or 6 people that do most of the stuff you hear on the radio. But with Spotify and with some of these stations where you can put it on shuffle, you're hearing lots of variations in the production value, but things all sound good. The high end and the low end, it all kind of falls within a certain range, and the vocals sit at a certain level, and the drums sit at, like, there's kind of a range that it all sits within. So when some bands and artists, they argue against it, that like it sounds fine or it sounds good, it's like, I'm not sure what you're hearing. Because when you put it in between 2 songs that are doing well, do you feel like there's a drop in quality? And it's not just you playing favorites, thinking you should be there.
I'm not quite understanding.
Just the idea when some bands, they don't hear the difference of their quality of their recording against bands and artists that they're trying to compete with. They think their recording sounds good, and they're just like, I don't trust your ears right now. Because what you got back, and again, this is where it turns into one of those things where it's a little bit of like ego set aside for a second, regardless of who worked on it. It's just like, we're trying to see if this passes the bar, as what the standards are. But and I tell bands too, it's like, take bands that you want to open for, where you wouldn't get booed off the stage, and put your music in a playlist with those bands. If you stick out like a sore thumb, there's something wrong with your music. Either you're in the wrong playlist or the recording quality is not there. I'm sorry, but that's what we need to address.
That's a great tip. I like how you put that.
What, to opening for
your
bands?
music, yeah, put your music in a playlist with bands you want to open for that you would fit, and see how you measure up. Yeah, that's a great tip.
Oh, that's and that I could go deeper with that one too, because even we were talking about finding our communities and stuff too. It's like, those 10 bands that you want to open for where you wouldn't get booed off the stage. It's like, go through, their socials, go through their discography, like listen to go through all that stuff, because it's all, there's so much information there of what you're, because you talk about marketing and branding and stuff like that. Like, there's so much information there where you can cherry pick some of the things you like from 10 different artists and go, you know what, this is what we're going to build our business around. And you don't need to sit and think about how to, reinvent the wheel. It's like, there's some pretty good rolly wheels already. So let's figure out how to, take stuff that works and make it our own. I can go on about the recording side of things, because like that's the one argument I've heard so much with bands. It's like, oh, you just don't get it. And I'm like, no, people do get it, but the recording quality is not there. And I could go on about it too, where like this last year, because of lockdowns and shutdowns and distancing, so many bands where I think it's great have been recording themselves. But that doesn't mean you're going to be amazing at it after 3 months. Like you're going to go through some, school of hard knocks a little bit to figure out what works and what doesn't. You're going to need to do. I have an artist that sent me the 3rd version of their song because they weren't happy with the first 2. And like, we worked on the first one, but they're just like, no, it's still not there. So they re-recorded it for a 3rd time. They didn't try to just jam it through it. I'm like, no, this is good. It's worthwhile to do this. Yeah, we could go on about the recording side of things. But you're on your end. Like, I wanted to bring that up as far as like the amount of music that you get submitted to you, and like there's only so many hours in a day, and there's the amount of time it takes for you to put the show together, and you're saying prepping for your interviews and stuff, and like when bands hear that someone listened to 15, 20 seconds of a song, you're saying that you still put it through the playlist. I used to listen to demos from bands where I go grocery shopping, and I would do a similar thing where I would have it on my iPod and I would just start it if I'm like, yeah, this is a for sure track, and then I would listen through everything. But not everyone's got that kind of time to listen through 120 different songs at 3 minutes a song, and like some of it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll do that too. I have an app on my phone that lets me tunnel into the media server. So I can listen in my car. I can listen, while I'm taking a jog. So I'm not necessarily sitting in a chair listening to every song all the way through. But yeah, it's, it's if you take time to make your art and you send it to somebody, they should take time to give it a fair shake. And I actually have some tips to help make it more likely that other people will listen, or that other talent, on-air talent and program directors will actually listen to music. One thing that I personally love seeing, and I know works for a lot of artists or a lot of talent, is if you send somewhere in your EPK or your email for fans of. Who are you like? List big name artists that you're like. For fans of Black Sabbath, Ozzy, and Corrosion of Conformity. For fans of the Black Keys and Brad Sucks. Whatever. List out who, give context, and then that can also be information to read on the air. But that's a big helpful one. And also radio IDs. If you're a small,
Yes.
Okay, so for people who don't know what it is, a radio ID is when you hear an artist on the radio say, hi, this is John Doe from the band XYZ, and you're listening to this great radio show with so-and-so on the air. Rock on. That kind of stuff. That's a radio ID. And Mike's done one of those for my show. And so is Dane, by the way. But yeah, so radio IDs, they're used for a lot of things on the radio. I use them to sweep into songs. So I may put up Mike or Dane's radio IDs leading into a Tense Machine track. Other stations or other shows and stations will just air them at random times to give the show or the station, keep you interested. Oh, I like that artist. And if that artist likes this radio station, then this must be a good station. I use them in the intros to my show, and I have so many at this point. I have to rotate them. But if I'm doing an interview that show, I'll always put that artist's radio ID at the top of the show. But radio ID. So it's a quick, simple thing to record. Obviously, if you're recording 36 of them, it takes you time. But if you're an independent artist and you're sending your music to a station or a show, pick out some of your favorites, a handful of your favorites that you really want to target, and pre-record radio IDs and send them with your track. That gets the PD or the host to at least take notice and go, wow, this artist put in the time to pre-record a radio ID for me. I'm going to listen to the music. And, don't tell anybody else in the radio business, but you're buying goodwill with the radio ID when you when you send it. It just makes us go, well, that's really nice. So, yeah, I mean, they may never play it. They may never play your music. But it makes it more likely that they'll at least listen to it. If they've got too many songs to listen to, the one with the radio ID winds up on the top of the stack.
So if they are playing your song already, would you recommend just go ahead and throw the ID together and send it off? Oh,
sure. Yeah.
Just in case they need it?
Yeah, they'll play it. They may do like I do, sweep into a song with it. They may just do something nice, something, some kind of promo with it. It for a station that has, for a real radio station that's running 24 hours a day, different shifts of jocks, it gives the jocks something to pull up and stick in at different times, if they have control over anything that plays, other than just the talk spot. But it gives if not, then the PD, program director, will stick it in. You can also call them up. It's also a good way to open a conversation and maybe get an interview.
It's true.
You could say, I've had artists call me up and go, hey, I'm listening to your show. You played some of my songs. Would you like a radio ID? Oh, yeah, I'd love one. Well, hey, would you like an interview? Yeah. What's your schedule look like next week? You know? And I interview everybody from, up and comers to the people who've been topping the charts for 40 years. So I just like talking to musicians. And some of them, yeah, it started out with a radio ID.
It's a good icebreaker.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things. They're like, usually bands or artists, they're emailing people, they're on the ask. But like you're on the offer. If you say like, hey, you're spinning the song, and thank you very much for that. Would you like a radio ID to go along with it? I've included it in the email, the 320 MP3 or the WAV file, whatever you need. And then yeah, you've sent off what you needed to do, and you've made the connection, and it's easy. It sounds like the way you're describing it, it's like, why isn't everyone doing that? But then I'm like, most bands don't know. We joked about it earlier when someone asked for a radio ID, and they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. What is that? Like, what is a radio ID?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, there's another thing, and this is a lot rarer and not as common to get play, but send a commercial. Our new album is coming out this date, blah, blah, blah. Send a commercial. Or in your email, initially making contact, sending the music, make an offer of giveaway stuff. So terrestrial radio stations almost always have, at least the FMs, almost always have a prize closet they need to keep stocked.
Yep.
And they give away stuff on the air all the time because they're broadcasting to a local market. So, there's people they can give away stuff to. The internet or the net stations, the syndicated shows like mine will sometimes do giveaways. It's the logistics make it harder. But offer a giveaway. Band merch, shirts, guitar picks, printed guitar picks. People love guitar picks. They do. I get requests for those all the time. Hey, did you get any? Nope. CDs or download codes. Make an offer. Don't send those proactively, but make the offer to send them. That can help your music get noticed and listened to, and if you do get played, the station might give away some stuff around it.
It's funny you mentioned with CDs and stuff. It's like radio campaigns can get very pricey for bands and artists, and it's a bit of a gut punch for a band that has 1,000 CDs pressed, and then your radio promoter is like, oh, can you send out 25 CDs to these 15 or 20 radio stations, like now and sort of overnight as quickly as possible? The amount of money that costs a band. Yeah. And then also just inventory. If you're a band that's on tour and it's like now all like a good chunk of your CDs are gone, or t-shirts, like, oh, can you send out 25 t-shirts? It's so expensive. It's so expensive to send that stuff around. So bands don't realize they're signing up for some of that when they're trying to do these radio campaigns. But it's cost of business, and it's marketing, and it's, the radio station, when they do their giveaways and stuff like that, like, it definitely helps the bands and artists. Yeah. So cost of business.
One other tip, and this is more for established bands, is record PSAs. Last year when the pandemic shut everybody down, a couple of labels got a bunch of their artists together to just record stay-at-home PSAs, public service announcements. Yeah, and they distributed them through All Access and MP3 or MPE and a lot of the other distro services. It was just like, hey, here you go. So then it's a public service announcement, but it's also marketing for you. It's keeping your name. It's branding. It's keeping your name in front of people. Hey, this is so-and-so from brand X. And remember, we're all in this together. Stay home, isolate, blah, 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 blah. Those kinds of things. If you're known, if you're somebody whose name will carry recognition with the audience, then a PSA makes sense. If you're just starting out, don't bother.
Those are all good tips. And again, like you're talking about the PSA thing, it's just like, something that's current that could go on the radio station that could help. And yeah, there's always content. There's always things that could be that bands and artists could be creating. Because this stuff's around the music, and it's more on the personality of the band and the character of the band. I think that's just as important these days too. When we talk about community and stuff, it's like music's one thing. So there's lots of great artists making music, but I think the personality and the character, and I do believe bands should stand for something. Great music's one thing, but I do think it's important to have a voice and to use it, because you do have people listening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The days of the untouchable rock god are gone.
So gone.
Yeah. You'll still get groupies. Don't worry about that. But, you'll still get free merch and endorsements. But, people want to know the real person behind the instrument. Behind the makeup, if you're doing if you've got a shtick, they want to know the person behind that.
No, actually, you triggered something I wanted to bring up. The idea, the untouchables these days, as far as not being able to connect with people, because most people you can get at on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. When you're back with Hard Heavy and Hair, when you're getting your people you want to interview, your guests for the show, how do you reach out to them?
It's a variety of ways. Some of it's trade secret. Several of them are friends of mine. Others, we're friends of friends, and I'll reach out to them directly. Others, I know their reps, their managers, their promoters, or I'll make contact with the label, and they'll put me in contact with the people. And then the people will get around to the artist, so just, ways like that.
So there's
and
networking.
Some artists come to me.
Sorry?
And then some artists come to me and say, hey, can we have an interview? You up for an interview? Yeah, sorry.
So there's networking, and then also that network can help you get the warm intro to
yes.
the warm introduction for somebody. But yeah, usually we're 1 or 2 degrees separation from somebody if you are trying to get a hold of somebody. And then, again, you're reaching out with a purpose. You're not just reaching out because you want something. It's hey, come on the show, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. And it's not sleazy. It's not using people or anything. This is how networking works. If you, Mike, asked me for an introduction to somebody I knew, I'd be happy to do it. I've had some of my guests have been, hey, do you know this? Oh, yeah, let me get you, I'll make a text introduction. And next thing I know, I'm on the phone with that artist going, hey, when can we do the,
It can be that simple. With the right people. There's been times I've been on calls with people and they were like, oh, I'll just ask them, and they just text them, and then you hear back, and you're like, that's how the real world works when you're friends with people. It's like, oh, they got a question, they answer it real quick. Just to put it out into the universe, is there anyone, you said that you're starstruck, is there anybody that you'd love to have on the show sometime?
This is going to date me, but one of the guys from Motley Crue. I'd love to talk to Vince Neil and or Nikki Sixx.
Well, just always put it into the universe, because if you don't, it might not come back to you. But that would be pretty good. Is there something in particular you want to ask them?
Actually, I'd like to ask them about any advice they have for artists who want to have as long a career as they've had. I mean, whether you like Motley Crue's music, whether you like the 4 men who are Motley Crue or not, you have to admit they're one of the biggest rock bands in the world and have been consistently since the early 80s. So they have insight as to how anybody can succeed in the music business. And they've gone through the mistakes and the bad steps. So I'd really like to talk to them and find out what advice they have for somebody coming up today.
That's always a great question. I don't believe there's a one size fits all path to success in music as a band, but I think there's a lot of parallels between things that work and things that don't work. And so I'm always curious to see, especially because you got a few decades in the music business, and even with Nikki Sixx, with like 6 a.m. and stuff like that, like to come back around with another pretty successful project, it's like having that and being able to obviously you do have some resources you can call in if you start a new project, but like it to be successful as well, it's like there's certain things that you did again that you knew worked the first time, and you can go, okay, well, let's just apply it to the modern day, like current music business, and see what happens, and it does work again. No, that excellent questions for them, and get the insight on that. 'Cause that's one of the things, not to ramp, it's just like if they were starting a band today, how would they approach it?
Yeah. And it's a very different world now than it was in 1981.
On that, I've almost had you for an hour 45. I have my webcams blocking out the timer there. You have time for one more question? 2 more questions? Sure. On the similar tip, if you were starting a podcast again today, any advice for somebody?
Well, I don't do a standard podcast. It's the radio show turned into a podcast, and then the interviews. I see a lot of people asking questions in Facebook groups about podcasting, and it always comes down to, what's the best mic should I buy?
Right.
Who cares? If you got something to say, use your phone. Use, the super cheap Yeti Snowball USB mic. I mean, the quality's not going to be great like an XLR mic, a studio quality mic, but you can get into it for less than $400 if you
start.
Yeah. If you got something to say it. And if somebody else is saying it, well, just say it in your unique way. So that's my advice for podcasters or anybody, or for radio. If you want to do what I do, you're not competition to me. I'm not worried, because you're not me and I'm not you. We've got our own unique voices and our own unique styles. So be you and broadcast you.
I like what you say again, like as far as the competition, like just because people are doing things that are similar doesn't mean you can't find your own way of doing it. And again, if you've got your voice and you want to go ahead and do it, just go ahead and do it, because very few things are stopping you these days. And again, you can take your cell phone and get an Anchor account, and now you've got a podcast that can be blasted around the planet. So, last question. I'm gonna get you back for part 2 eventually. Last question. You do some voiceover work.
Yes.
How did you get into that? Any favorite shows, favorite characters? I got a bunch of questions I would ask about that, but I was just curious to.
Oh, unfortunately, I don't do anything as exciting as voiceover for shows or cartoons. That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's mostly comedy bits for podcasts or radio, comedy radio shows, phone trees. If you call and reserve certain hotels, you'll hear my voice on the phone tree. Things like that. I did a lot of video courses, and then the broadcast work, and on the air, on the radio show, it's a lot. It's the over-the-top on-air voice, the radio guy. Hey, this is Pariah Burke, and you're listening to the Hard, Heavy, and Hair Show. It's not the regular voice. But even through that, people were like, well, I like your voice. Can you record this commercial for me? Can you do this, phone tree for me? Things like that. And then or can you do this comedy bit? Yeah. So that's kind of how that came about. Doing recording some video courses and teaching, and then the radio show.
Is there any, because you mentioned cartoons, any shows you'd love to work on?
almost any cartoon, I think would just be a blast. And I know how that process works, and I know it's hard work, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. If I had my absolute, I'm a geek. My absolute joy would be to do Batman. If I could be a voice of Batman. But I mean, you got actors like Bruce Greenwood and what's his name? The guy who did it so much in the 90s. I can't remember his name, but you had some great voice actors. So I'll never have a shot at Batman, but if I did, that would be the ideal.
That's pretty awesome, though. And again, it's just you because now I can hear it. Now I can hear Bruce Wayne. It could be again. You just gotta put it into the universe. That's how some things work. You just need to throw it out there and see what happens. So,
well, if anybody is out there casting for the next Batman cartoon, even a short, give me a call. I'll get you whatever audition reel you need.
I think
Batman.
I think that's a good place to start wrapping this up. I will get you back for a part 2 because there's still a few things I'd love to chat about with your history with the radio show and just bands, because there's things we want to talk about too, about certain bands. That's like how bands can break into like the charts or in like some of the top bands that are on festivals and stuff, because there's a lot of bands that seem to be there forever, so I'd love to chat about more of that later. So maybe in the fall, once we get past the late festival season, we can have a sit down and talk about some of that.
That'd be cool.
Awesome. Anything else you want to give a shout out to before we sign off?
No, thanks for having me on. It's been a great conversation.
My pleasure. Just trying to think. I'm loving the shirt.
Oh, thank you. So this is the show logo.
With the hard, heavy and hair shirt on there.
Yeah.
And everyone can find you online where?
PariahRocks.com. PariahRocks.com. That's the show's main website. You can find, and everything's there, but you can also find my video interviews with artists on YouTube, YouTube/PariahRocks. Social media, everything is at Pariah Rocks, except for Facebook. Just search for Hard, Heavy, and Hair on Facebook. You'll find the page.
Excellent. I will put those details in the description below if you're watching the replay on YouTube. All right. Thanks again to everyone for tuning in tonight, took part in the chat. Any of the messages we did not get to, any questions, we'll answer those after the show. Once again, my name is Mike Langford. This has been DearBands Live. Our guest tonight, Pariah Burke. That's our time for tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching.